Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today we're going to take a look at the next major meeting of Jupiter and Saturn in the great Jupiter-Saturn cycle, which is taking place right now and will also take place again later in 2026. This meeting between the two planets is taking place in the shape of a trine. Last year, we saw them meet in a square. Going all the way back to 2020, we saw them start their new cycle in a conjunction that took place at the end of 2020 in the sign of Aquarius. So we're going to be revisiting the cycle that the two planets have shared together going back to 2020 up until now. I'm going to give you some dates and timelines to track if you want to. And then I'm also going to give you a list of 5 things to watch for and some deeper meditative questions you can ask yourself, given that the two planets are connecting in a trine right now. Their trine is connecting, by the way, as part of the grand water trine that's in the sky, but it really shouldn't be. We shouldn't underestimate how powerful just the trine between these two planets is, given the historic nature of the cycle that they share together. So we're going to break that down, that particular part of the grand water trine, the meeting of Jupiter and Saturn. So before we get into it, as always, remember to like and subscribe, share your comments and reflections if you have them, click that notification bell for updates so you know when we're going live. We're seeing if we can get to 100,000 subscribers on this channel by next summer. Your 2-second little click on the subscribe button helps us immensely. So thank you for doing that. If you haven't already, transcripts of any of these daily talks can be found on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. I'm going to take you over there right now because this is the final week to register and save on the upcoming year 1 course using the early bird rate. Click on courses tab, first year course. Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic is our immersive first year program. It is a fantastic course, truly one of the best things I've created outside of like my kids. If you scroll down, you're going to learn everything there is to know about this course. At the end of today's video, there's also an additional little informational bonus video tossed onto the end. It'll tell you more about it as well. At the bottom, you'll find the early bird rates, which are available until October 31st. The class starts November 15th, so it's coming up really soon now. Take advantage of the sale while it lasts, but also, if you're someone who wants to take the course, but you have to work within a fixed or tighter budget, you want to make sure you're not hurting yourself or going into big debt or anything like that. We don't want people to hurt themselves to take a spiritual course that can transform your life and add a lot of spiritual value to your work with astrology. Use the tuition assistance button. Click on the apply now. Tell us your situation, whatever it is. If the exchange rate is high in a different country, if you're in between jobs, if you're on a fixed or limited income, if you're on retirement or disability, or you're a single parent, you're in school, whatever the case might be, please use the tuition assistance, pick within a sliding scale. That's always been an option that we have used for people who might need help. We want to make sure that a spiritual topic like astrology is financially accessible for people of all backgrounds. It's very important to us at Nightlight, and we've been doing it that way for going on 16 years. So anyway, hope to see you in classes soon. I can't wait to start. One reason I've been saying every day why you might want to study with us. At Nightlight, there is a legacy that is baked into everything we do of amazing education. I grew up with parents who were educators. I grew up with parents who both have PhDs and spent a lot of their lives devoted to study and learning. I, in my 20s, went through 2 graduate programs, and in both of those graduate programs was a graduate teaching assistant. So I have a background in education and in teaching, and in going through and working with a lot of amazing educators. I had fantastic professors and mentors in my creative writing programs. Outside of that, I've had amazing mentors in yogic lineages, in ayahuasca lineages, and in astrological lineages. I like to collect good teachers and interesting people, and there is a lot of that has gone into Nightlight, from Jeffrey Cornelius to Robert Schmidt. The kinds of people that I've had the benefit to learn from for brief periods of time or more extended periods of time are some of the best in the field. And so when you come through this school, what you're really getting is we pride ourselves on good education, not just good content, but on a good educational process that's been thoughtfully built. So if that appeals to you, please come study with us. Check it out at the end of today's content. I hope to see you guys soon. All right, so on that note, let's shift our attention over to the real-time clock and take a look at this Jupiter-Saturn moment. So a lot of us a lot of astrologers, including myself, have been spending time talking about the grand water trine. Very important. But what is happening right now, and I'm going to actually speed this up just a little bit from the time I'm recording this to Monday, October 27th. That's today. And you'll notice that Jupiter is just a degree and less than a degree and a half away from an exact trine to Saturn. Now, Saturn is in Jupiter's sign of Pisces, while Jupiter is exalted, and the two are connecting in a trine, which is fantastic reception. We call it reception because It's sort of like this. If you have someone over to your house as a guest, but you don't really like them, they smell a little funny, or you're just like, yeah, you're put off by them, you're going to help them. You're going to provide for their needs while they're in your home, but you're not so naturally favorably inclined to them in mood and spirit. And that changes the dynamic. This is an imperfect analogy, but see if you can follow it. Whereas if someone comes over to your house and they're a guest and they're obviously dependent upon you to get their needs met, but you really like them, you're really eager to please them, how much more of your facilities, your thoughtfulness, your resources will you make available to that person naturally, because you're just, that generosity is flowing because you really appreciate and have some kind of connection with that guest in your home. That's more like the situation that Jupiter and Saturn find themselves in than if Saturn were not in one of Jupiter's signs inclined favorably through a trine, which is a very positive kind of aspect anyway. So we have a nice connection between the two right now. And we also have a part of their historic cycle. The two exist in a cyclical dynamic, their own synodic cycle, which we'll map out in a second, that puts them right now at what we call a waxing trine. That waxing trine is a very favorable part of their cycle in terms of their ability to work together within the context of the larger cycle. We find them thus in a very nice situation to be of benefit to one another right now, both in terms of their overall cyclical dynamic and in terms of the actual sign exchange that they find themselves in. So as far as Jupiter-Saturn dynamics go, this is nice. This is a good situation. So let's break down what that means. Now, what I want to start with is just a basic understanding of what the two planets do when they get together. Then we're going to revisit every aspect of their cycle that has happened so far. And then I'm going to give you some deeper questions to meditate on before we leave. I'll then show you what's on my altar this week, and we'll wrap up that way, because I'm not going to add any horoscopes today because we've got a bunch of horoscopes coming as the week goes on. There's several horoscope episodes. So, and this doesn't play easily, this Jupiter-Saturn dynamic, into angular horoscope. So anyway, on that note, let's get into it. So when these two planets are meeting throughout the entirety of their cycle, they bring two seemingly contradictory principles into dynamic exchange. Jupiter, we might say, broadly speaking, is associated with life, abundance, all of the most fertile symptoms in nature, and with expansion of life. Saturn is naturally associated with death and winter and contraction and endings. And so if you just take them as natural kind of, if you take the planets as metaphorical extensions of nature, you have spring and winter, or you have expansion and contraction, or life and death. These are good, simple ways of thinking about the exchange of Jupiter and Saturn that can help us start to formulate some ideas about what their cycle means overall. Jupiter, take it from the level of life and of expansion, which are sort of energetic, natural metaphors, and instead bring it into the level of cohesion, meaning, purpose, understanding. Jupiter, broadly speaking, represents the idea that once you're in human form, and we're relating to these archetypes as human beings, that the feeling or sense that we get when we come into a body and we emerge into the human sphere of activity and life in the cosmos is that life is meaningful, life is purposeful, life has a certain kind of order, and that felt sense ends up embodying or incarnating in certain kinds of social paradigms. For example, government, ideally, not government as a corrupt, as a force of depravity, but ideally speaking, government provides human life with an organizational standard, with a sense of coherent meaning, purpose, law, and order. That's Jupiter. Or religion, where Jupiter provides us with doctrines and dogmas of truth, justice, beauty, order, morality, and some understanding of how everything works, or some explanations about how everything works. In that sense, archetypally, religion is Jupiterian. Education, broadly speaking, we should have some sense that the universe is intelligible and that we can understand it. And so we build an understanding of reality through consensus teachings and disciplines like math and science and language and so forth. And so education provides us with a sense of the universe and life being intelligible, meaningful, unified, and coherent. So education, religion, government, all Jupiterian institutions, archetypally speaking. But on a felt sense, on a felt intuitive level, every soul has something like a soul's code. There's a famous book by James Hillman called The Soul's Code. Highly recommend reading it, by the way. Great book. The soul's code is like a dharma or a wisdom that you know about what is truth within you and how that's being oriented through the voice of higher wisdom and higher truth, the higher self within you. And if you listen, if you learn to listen, in every moment, in every situation, there is a sense of wisdom and discernment that grants meaning and purpose and like an internal, very personal, subjective sense of what is real or true. Now, following that, learning to identify that voice and not mistaking it for selfish, vain, egotistical voices within ourselves is a journey. It's a learning process for all of us. But that even that personal sense of there's a code within me that I have to stay in touch with and let guide me, that shouldn't deviate radically from the standards of the educational systems, the religious and spiritual traditions, the governmental traditions. Like, my truth should not allow me to go and murder someone, for example, but my truth is probably unique in each situation and should have some relation with these broader systems, but is also very personal and individual. So that on a personal level, Jupiter represents personal wisdom that is gained through felt experience and listening to that inner voice of judgment and discernment. That is also Jupiterian. And we gain insight into that level of wisdom through experience, through trial and error. That we call that evolution, spiritually speaking. And it has something to do with morality. There's a felt sense in which Jupiter is moral and ethical. But Jupiter also, we have to locate that personal sense of wisdom within paradigmatic structures or systems of wisdom. For example, I would say that the way that I've cultivated my own, the ongoing evolution of my own little Jupiter inside has happened through things like taking part in the paradigms of yoga, of the ayahuasca traditions from South Central America that have been meaningful to me, of astrology for sure, right? That's the big one. The Christian church growing up, a particular denomination of the Christian church growing up. I've hung out with the Quakers and taken out, right? You get what I mean? So every individual usually locates something of their personal understanding, which is so unique, within or alongside of different paradigms. And now more than ever, it's a bit of a buffet, right? Because culture and religion and truth is so much more of a melting pot today than it really ever has been. So it's not as common for someone to be strictly identified with just one culture, just one religious or educational stream of influence, because we also have the ability now to discern universal patterns within different traditions where, again, it's sort of Jupiter's in a bit of a melting pot these days. So anyway, that's Jupiter. But then remember, we place it alongside of Saturn. And Saturn is also a great teacher. And Saturn and Jupiter are actually, in some ways, they're two sides of the same coin, because Saturn also represents wisdom. But Saturn doesn't represent wisdom through things like coherence and, let me put it differently. Saturn brings wisdom through impermanence, through death, through decay, through old age, through time, through things that don't last and fall apart. Anyone listening to this knows exactly what I'm talking about if you think about it like this. How many times in your life when something that you thought was true or real turned out to be over, or it wasn't true, or it could no longer last, or it no longer served a purpose or function, didn't feel very enlightened by that ending, even if it was difficult, or even if there was a sense of disillusionment accompanying it, right? You know exactly what I'm talking about. You have an understanding and it reaches a limit. Oh, well, I thought that was real or true. I thought this was the best way to go. Or in any time I got into a certain situation, I had an inner sense of what to do. And at this time, when I did that thing I always do because I thought it was right, it wasn't the right thing. So reaching the limits of truth, reaching the limits of a particular perspective or perception or a particular behavior or pattern that we have used or we've been a part of because we thought it was true, because it granted a sense of meaning, coherence, and purpose. But then it reaches its limit, it reaches its expiration date, it dies, it falls apart. Or when things in life generally fall apart, the wisdom of pain, suffering, death, winter, impermanence, old age, death, disease, all of those things are actually paradoxically living presences in the circle of life. And those living presences deepen and add such richness, like Pluto. The word Pluto means riches. And in ancient astrology, prior to the discovery of the outer planet Pluto, Saturn really carried much of the same symbolic meaning that Pluto now does. in terms of it being a very fertile planet. Saturn is associated with the harvest and with the bountifulness of the harvest, exalted in the sign of Libra. But also with decay and death and winter, rules the two signs in the middle of winter, Cap and Aquarius. So this is a planet that brings life, but it brings life through the contractive principle of reality. Death, loss, decay, endings, separations, not unions. And so when these two planets get together, it's remarkable how our sense of what is moral, what is good, what is true, what is just, the government systems, the paradigms of religion, faith, education, institutions that are ideally supposed to provide meaning and coherence go through contractive spaces that then allow for newer, deeper, more veteran, time-proven, wiser versions of life to emerge. Saturn, Jupiter, when they get together, reflect this idea that now your paradigm can evolve, or your understanding, your wisdom, your faith, your morality can improve because it's hitting some kind of reality principle that it wasn't previously in touch with, or it's reaching a moment of expiration or limitation or death or ending. And now the two, because they're meeting, can present us with new wisdom, with better understanding, with deeper, wiser structures in our lives, and so on and so forth. So their cycles are fantastic, and fantastic to study and track, which is what we're going to do next. So what I want you to think about before we track them are these brief 5 things, which I already touched on here, so these are just in review. 1, as these two planets get together, which they're doing in the sky right now, and we're also going to study the previous parts of their cycle since 2020, whenever they get together, they ask us how you can become more mature and more responsible. Not in some lockdown, overly conservative or rigid way, but what is the wise, it's like a blend of joyfulness and wisdom and greater maturity and responsibility all coming together at once. How do you level up? Number 2, how are the paradigms, structures, systems of faith and beliefs that you have in any area of life, what to speak of, a specific religion or spirituality or something, but how are your faith and beliefs evolving, changing, shifting, or needing to do so right now? Number 3, how are you personally, apart from paradigms, how are you personally growing wiser, more luminous? Like, how is the shape of your halo starting to appear? And just like, what are the little traces of light that are starting to appear right now? Because you're getting wiser, you're learning, you're evolving. Pay attention to that, because it's not something we spend a lot of time tracking or learning to track. We just broadly say, yeah, I'm evolving every year, every day. I mean, I don't know anyone into this kind of stuff that doesn't feel like as they live life, they're growing and evolving. But rarely do we actually track the inflection points of that process. Jupiter and Saturn, the aspects within their cycle reflect these inflection moments. Now, when you're in the midst of it, sometimes it's hard to see, which is why adding in the other parts of the cycle can really help. Number 4, think about structural changes. Anything structural in your life that has to change to become wiser, more grounded, more real, broader, more inclusive, but also more substantive. How are structures needing to change or be modified? And then finally, how is your personal sense of morality and ethics, like your moral compass, your personal sense of what is right, true, good, how is that evolving right now? So these are things you can ask yourself. These are things that you can watch for, excuse me. All right, now let's go back to the real-time clock and let's take a look at this moment. So first of all, I want to go back in time. So they're trine right now, very closely trine. But actually, before they meet in a perfect trine, they're going to refrain because they're both going to change directions. That's really fascinating. We'll talk about that in a minute, but let's go back in time to the beginning of their cycle and work our way forward. So you have the option. You don't have to do this. No one's making you, but I highly recommend it. So what we want to do is come back to their meeting, which took place on December 21st of 2020. Jupiter and Saturn conjoined in Aquarius. Now, there are multiple ways you can track this. Way number 1, easiest way to track, is to simply look at the dates and times and ask yourself those big questions. What was changing, evolving in terms of structures, faith, beliefs, morality, wisdom, etc. What paradigms were changing? How are they evolving? Now, when they get together in 2020, they're seeding the start of a new cycle. This seeding point is sometimes the hardest to recognize, like a new moon, because it's invisible. And so there's something very similar about a conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn in terms of the seeds planted and how they will sprout, develop, or evolve over many years to come. So you could start by just asking yourself, what new forms of faith, wisdom, understanding, beliefs, paradigms, structures were starting to emerge or evolve in my life? Survey your whole life and think about this as the starting point of that Jupiter-Saturn cycle. All right. So that is the seeding point of their cycle. Now, way number 2 of tracking would be to, broadly speaking, just track the development of things like faith, wisdom, understanding, paradigms, structures, beliefs, etc. But add in the whole sign house location of each phase. So in this case, you would just simply add in the whole sign house of Aquarius in your birth chart and think about the topics of that house as an important part of where and how this paradigmatic or structural change is taking place. This evolution of your wisdom, beliefs, and understanding starts in the whole sign house of Aquarius. You can do it that way as well. So whichever is easier or less stressful, there's really no right or wrong way of tracking on this level. All right, the next part of the cycle, the next hard moment of the cycle is going to take place in 2024. So we're going to go forward to 2024, and I'm going to back this up to August. In August of 2024, Jupiter was in Gemini and Saturn was in Pisces. This is just a little over a year ago. They met in their square at this time, and then they met again in December of 2024. So as they meet in their square, here they are again meeting in December of 2024. Between August and December of 2024, there's also a another major inflection moment in their cycle. So what I would ask yourself again would be, between August and December of last year, what was I learning? How was I growing? How was I evolving? How was my faith and wisdom developing or shifting? What priorities were coming forth, and what new information was providing me with new understandings? How were the system structures, paradigms, beliefs evolving? So all of that, again, to reflect on between, say, August and December of last year. The square is typically a harder moment of confrontation or conflict between things. A certain way of doing things is coming to an end. A new way of doing things is emerging, but the meeting is happening through stress and tension. Whereas the seeding point is so visionary, so sort of pure and innocent and young and undeveloped, right? The square is now developing that seed, but through conflict and even sometimes a bit of a crisis or a real moment of like what's working and not working, and how do things really need to evolve to accommodate new understandings, new visions, etc. And now that would be level 1. Level 2 would be add in the whole sign house of Gemini and Pisces. In this square between August and December, the 2 planets were in these 2 signs. And so you could then relate the starting point in Aquarius to the inflection point between Jupiter and Pisces if you wanted to try and tie all that together. It's creative work. Do it. It's fun. Of course, you don't have to. You can just think about this more generally or generically. All right, now let's move along to the next square, which took place in June of 2025. So in June of 2025, this is just last summer, Jupiter and Saturn met once more in a square. This square is the final meeting between them that spans about a year now. We had August of 24 to June of 25 as almost a full year of them dancing back and forth in a square. This time they meet in Cancer and Aries, so that could give you 2 whole sign houses to look at. But once again, it reflects a new moment of understanding, a new conversation taking place between 2 areas of life. But again, broadly speaking, it's another moment where new structures, understanding, belief, wisdom, the centers of meaning, purpose are evolving in our life. Beliefs have to adapt and shift and change somehow, and structures have to accommodate new understandings. So that was the square. That takes you through all 3 parts of the square. Now we reach this moment where the 2 planets in the end of 2025 here are almost going to trine, but they refrain from it. This is fascinating. Now, on one level, I would just say count it as a trine. It doesn't really matter that they don't exactly perfect. Who cares? You can see the 2 planets both get to the 25th degree right here. This is by about the middle of November. But what I want you to notice is that Saturn or Jupiter then stations at 25 degrees in about 9 minutes of Cancer. Saturn is retrograde at 25:22, and shortly after, Jupiter turns retrograde, we're going to see that Saturn will then station. So Saturn stationing comes by about November 29th, and then it turns direct. So the two planets are slowing down to meet each other. One turns backward, the other one turns forward. This is called refrenation. Now, there's two ways of reading this. One is, hey, look, it's close enough, so just count this as another moment of their exchange. In this case, their exchange points toward the two of them really having nice cooperative energy. Things are flowing along, and whereas the square and if the opening conjunction reflects a new vision, and the square, the first real moment of contractive crisis and tension between them to accommodate the new vision and build it through a level of conflict or tension. Now we're talking about them cooperating and really harmonizing together. Things are coming together to support the building of the new structure, of the new paradigm, of the new understanding. There's a very fluid and supportive dynamic where the old and the new can flow together. The new vision and the old structure are somehow accommodating one another, or there's a way in which we're able to adapt really easily and fluidly to new things that are happening and asking us to accommodate. It's like, here's new information. Okay, well, I can easily accommodate that into the new understanding, structures, wisdom that I've been cultivating and developing for the past year. So their meeting right now really has a very harmonious feeling behind it. So reflect right now on how the evolution of these Jupiter-Saturn dynamics in your life is taking place more smoothly, more harmoniously, most likely. You could expand that into an exploration of all three water sign houses, given the grand water trines, or just look at the whole sign houses of Cancer and Pisces. So let's track out the rest of the trine pattern. It's strange because they come so close together, but then the two planets aren't actually going to trine perfectly until September of 2026. And they do so, basically they do so at the very end of August. At the very, very end of August, like the 31st into the 1st of September, Jupiter and Saturn will trine now in fire signs, Leo and Aries. So we've really had so many different signs at play through, and this is why in some ways tracking them through the houses, it can be really useful, but also their cycle is so holistic that if you just reflect on the broader questions that I've been giving you, you'll find that it works really easily. Anyhow, so Jupiter and Saturn trining one another happens in September of 26 perfectly. Then we have them trining two more times going into 2027. So this trine, this building and developing, this cohesiveness between the two of them, this mutual level of support and development of new structures, paradigms, wisdom, really flowing along nicely during the trine. Love to see that. April of 2027, the two planets get together again, if I've got this right. Is it? Let's see. No, sorry. Let me back this up just a touch. Okay, here we are. So this is early April of 2027 that Jupiter and Saturn trine again. And then they trine once more in July of 2027. And this is all taking place in the signs of Leo and Aries. So that will be the next place that the two connect. Right now it's Cancer and Pisces. So it's very watery. 2026, it becomes very fiery, all the way into April and July of 2027. It continues to be so fiery. I think that's really fascinating. Now, that trine, again, all of it is typically one of the smoothest, most subjectively positive. It really feels like the wind's at your back in terms of the space of natural evolution and growth and understanding and developing new structures, and paradigms are just growing and starting to even flourish and provide blessings, benefits. Harmonious connections with other people tend to come through the trines like this. Feeling like you've kind of found your niche or hit your stride, not uncommon for Jupiter-Saturn trines. Well, this takes us into their opposition, which becomes like the full moon of their cycle, where once again, the overall purpose of the cycle to establish new vision, new wisdom, is kind of moves through a point of contraction and crisis. So it's December of 2029 that Jupiter in Scorpio will oppose Saturn in Taurus. The two will then oppose in April of 2030, again in Scorpio and Taurus. They will then oppose again in November of 2020, and that will happen now in Sagittarius and Gemini. They then oppose again in 2031, August. Go forward all the way to August. Sagittarius and Gemini again. And then finally, they oppose in October of 2031, one last time, Sagittarius and Gemini. So that everything is building toward that full moon, which really becomes the major point of total development, reconstruction, harvesting. The seeds of any cycle are the conjunction. The opposition typically is where the seeds are brought forth in manifestation, but now there exists a tension between the opposites that's very strong and a part of the harvesting or manifesting of the karma of the cycle. So anyway, you get a feel for how the whole cycle works starting in 2020, going all the way to 2030, 2031 is the midpoint. So right now, the point is between 2020 and 2030, we're sort of at a midway within the first half of the cycle. We're like between first quarter and waxing gibbous moon, you might say. So as the two planets are trining in the sky right now, again, broadly speaking, there are three questions you could ask yourself based on the 5 things to watch for that I'll leave us with. One would be, what structures, systems, paradigms have been growing or building since December of 2020 that are reaching a point of rapid growth or development? Where am I finding blessings, benefits, ease, and support for the building of paradigm, structures, beliefs, understanding, and wisdom? Going back to that 2020 moment. And then 2, what systems or structures are finding or needing greater support as they grow? Where is the support coming in from? Where am I experiencing natural sense of allies, help, benefits, a natural feeling of finding the support where I need it? And then where do I need greater support? Where is there a call for greater support? And then finally, in what way is my faith, my beliefs, my ideologies, my understanding growing or evolving as a person, as a soul, based on all of my experiences? What is the wisdom of this moment of my life? How am I reaching a point of real growth and development in my understanding, my faith, my beliefs, my commitments? So I know that a cycle like this is so big and it can feel so vast that I hope this hasn't been too overwhelming. I wanted to present you with meaningful timelines, meaningful questions and themes to watch for, an archetypal understanding of the dynamics between these two planets, and some different ways of tracking all of it. It's hard to get all of this in like 35 minutes or whatever, but hopefully we've done a good enough job to really give you something to work with today. I certainly, that's my intention. Anyway, let's talk about what's on my altar this week before we close for the day. So you guys know me, I always have something on the altar that I like to try to highlight. Right there, you're going to see a magic marker. You're like, why is there a magic marker on your altar? Well, you can't see it. Well, maybe you can if I turn a little bit. There's a whiteboard right there with the little highlighters on it. So on my whiteboard every week, I typically have a list of the major projects I'm working on. Am I developing the slides for a new Moon in Profile episode? Or am I revising the curriculum or slides in a particular class within one of our programs? What content am I building this week, etc. I have noticed over the years that I tend to stress myself out because of the way that I build lists. I don't know if you guys are like me and you keep lists or not. Maybe you're just like way too cool, or you're just like more evolved and you're like, lists, come on, guy. Lists are from 1992 or something. But anyway, my to-do lists, what I typically do is I bite off more than I can chew. I put more on my to-do list than I should. And there's far more time to do most of the things than I give myself the time for. And so in this way, I create a situation that is like artificially rushed and anxious because I just put too much on my to-do list. And so my prayer this week and what I'm putting on my altar is for the gods, the goddess, the universe to help me when I make my lists to be a little kinder, a little slower, and just a little bit wiser, and just give myself a little bit more space. I'm always an ambitious, hardworking person. I've always been that way. But I think there's a little room for slowing down just a touch. It's kind of like my cell phone, like get off the cell phone. It's also like, let's not make a list that breaks my back. So sounds kind of silly when I say it like that. And it's embarrassing, like to share because, I definitely want to be, I guess I want to be seen as someone who doesn't have a problem creating like a manageable list. Like you can just picture me like manically scribbling way too many things now. But anyway, I think it's human, and I suspect that I'm not alone. So you can put a magic marker on your altar if you want, and change your relationship with list making. Maybe you're the kind of person who needs to stop making lists for a couple weeks. Maybe you need to start making them. Or maybe if you're like me, you need to figure out how to make them just a little bit more manageable. Whatever the case might be, bringing intentionality, connection, relationship, like I'm putting that magic marker on the altar because I want to talk to God about it, because I want to talk to Goddess about it. And I know that that will happen if I just put a marker on the altar. Throughout the week, that conversation will start happening. I don't even have to be like super like sit down like, okay, gods and goddesses, now it's time to talk about the marker. I just put it there and then shit starts happening. And that's how the conversation takes place. It just takes a little intentionality. And before you know it, we're getting some insights. Good time, by the way, to get these insights and wisdom while Jupiter and Saturn are flowing together nicely right now. Anyway, after I sign off right now, there's an informational video about our year 1 program. It starts November 15th. Early bird ends at the end of this week. The thing that I will repeat to close is that there is a legacy at Nightlight of amazing education, not just from myself, but from our staff. We have people who are dedicated students of life. They like to learn. People at Nightlight are people that like learning new things, not just astrology, but like the learning of life in general. Very Jupiter-Saturn. I've had amazing teachers. I have had some of the best teachers that I've had a chance to study with in the field in like recent memory. That some of the best teachers literally in our field. Some of them have passed, and I feel a deep sense of responsibility around Nightlight to make it a place that prides itself on not just good astrology, but good education. So anyway, on that note, I hope you come study with us. We'll see you again soon. Bye, everyone. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around. I'm excited to tell you about our upcoming program, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. This is our first year course in Hellenistic astrology, and it begins again this November. In this video, I'm going to tell you about the course, the format of the course, and how to register. So let's go ahead and get into it. What is this course about? Well, if you are not familiar, ancient Hellenistic astrology is the earliest and original form of horoscopic astrology. All of the subsequent forms and schools of astrology that have existed over thousands of years come from these philosophical and theoretical roots. And so what you're doing when you study Hellenistic astrology is you're going back to understand the why behind absolutely everything. Why were there ever such a thing as houses and signs in the first place? How were the planets ever assigned to rule various portions of the zodiac in the first place? How do you use the categories of essential dignity, and why were they ever created in the first place? If you're someone like me, you like to know the why behind things, because once you understand the why, then you know how to use things more intuitively. So really the point of Hellenistic astrology, in my opinion, is not so much about going back and becoming a traditional astrologer or just being traditional for the sake of being traditional, as much as it is about grasping the roots of the entire system and paradigm. When you understand those roots, you have more intuition and understanding, which allow for you to be much more artful and fluid in the way that you speak the language of astrology. We call this class Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic because while it is about going back to understand the philosophical, theoretical, technical roots of the tradition, it's also about fluidly bridging those things with modern astrology and all of its most unique contributions. For example, modern astrology has given us so much psychological depth and personal depth. And so in a modern astrological setting, you're going to get the ability to explore your own character, your own psychology, and you're going to be able to utilize astrology for a process of healing and personal transformation. But when you pair that with ancient astrology, and it's almost like predictive karmic analytics, you really have a full toolkit to work with. And so that's also a great mission of ours at Nightlight, is to bridge ancient and modern forms, which is why we call the program Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. So that's just a little kind of overview of the program. If you want to know more about the specifics of the curriculum and of the syllabus, what I encourage you to do is go over to nightlightastrology.com, click on the courses page, go to the first year course, scroll down, and you'll see this over 12 months you'll learn about. And here you're going to see more of a detailed breakdown of the curriculum itself. I can promise you that if you've studied astrology in modern context, but you've never gone back to the ancient roots, while some of these topics may look familiar to you and you go, oh, I've already learned about that. Unless you've studied them from the Hellenistic perspective, I guarantee that you are not going to be familiar with this content. Hellenistic astrology is mind-blowingly new and interesting for most people. And if you've never studied it, again, don't assume that anything on this list is something you're going to be familiar with. In that way, the program is really ideal for a variety of different people, and I'll say more about that in a second. So what is the format of the course? Let's go to that next. Scroll down and you're going to see that the course includes 30 online webinars that I lead throughout the year. Over the course of a year together, I have 30 classes that are broken into different units of material. In between those classes, we have breakout study sessions with your course director and 2 TAs. They're going to lead you through Q&A sessions and tutoring sessions to make sure that you have a lot of support in between major units of study. In addition, we also have an interactive group forum discussion where you can ask questions year-round and get an answer within a business day in the student forum, where a lot of people also connect and build community. Lots of people in that forum also develop like little meetup groups outside of class. That's very common in all of our programs. It's a very community-loving, warm space where anyone's also welcome. Throughout the course, you're also going to find that for every lesson, if you're just there as a hobby student, you can just listen to the webinars. They're all recorded for you. So if you can't make the live webinars, everything is housed on the website as recordings. I'd say about 40 or 50% of our students are going to be following along at their own pace, whereas the other half might be attending the live webinars. But it's really kind of, you know, if you can attend a few and then 1 week you got to be gone, the recordings are always there. You have lifetime access to everything in the course, so it's not a big deal. For every lesson as well, if you're someone who wants to go really, really deep, maybe you have the intention to practice professionally, this course is set up with an optional certification exam at the end from our school, from our program. So you can, you know, if you want to build that resume and develop the credentials from our programs, you can do that, but you also, it's optional, so you don't have to. And outside of every lesson, we have recommended reading. We have supplemental bonus content, all of which is optional, but it's there for people who might want a lot more, whereas some people will take the webinars themselves, and that'll be plenty. So it's really flexible in that way. Also, this is one program within 4 years of curriculum that are meant to go together. And so most people who come through our first year program will end up taking our second year program, where we develop forecasting and prediction and transit tracking techniques. Our third year program, which is aimed at counseling and psychology. So psychological counseling skills is our third year program. And then the Oracle Within, which is our exploration of the philosophical, spiritual roots of the divinatory oracular tradition of astrology. So there's a lot of material there. We also have another 1 year program in horary astrology for some people who want to add that predictive tool to their toolkit. So there's just a lot of material at Nightlight that this class is actually just one part of, which can be taken standalone, or for some people, they get into it, they're going to love it. You're going to hang out with us for 3 or 4 years worth of content. This program is ideal for a number of different types of students of astrology. I'll say that for starters. So let's see here. I'll stop sharing this. So we have there's a profile of the typical students who come through our courses. One is going to be people who just want a very guided introduction to ancient astrology because you've never had it before. Maybe you're only familiar with modern, and you want that guided, structured approach to learning traditional for the first time. Also, people who are brand new to astrology in general, there's no better place to start than at the roots of the ancient foundations. So whether you're a total beginner or just a beginner to Hellenistic, this is a great place to start. If you are someone who's been around astrology for a long time, but you've never had a guided, structured approach to Hellenistic astrology, again, this is a great place to start. I promise you, Hellenistic is very different than what you're familiar with, and you're going to need a guided and structured approach at some point in time. I also think for people who are looking for a lineage, which means not just a bunch of information, but a practitioner-specific based approach where you get to see a practitioner work with clients. You get to hear how a practitioner has prioritized different techniques and why. You're going to get a structured, spiritually grounded focus at Nightlight as well, where if you're looking for someone who practices astrology but also values grounded, everyday spiritual practice, that's Nightlight. If you want a community that's been in the industry for a long time now, this is our 16th year of teaching programs and guiding students through trainings. So all of those things, if they matter to you, this is a great place to study. It's a warm community atmosphere. It's spiritually grounded. It's focused. It's academically rigorous. It's going to provide you the appropriate preparation for practicing professionally, especially if you go through all of our programs. But also for those who are just curious and love astrology for your own personal interests, this is going to be a great place for you to learn and grow and thrive and feel like you have a lot of support around you in the curriculum, the teachers, the community, as you're developing, what might just be a personal interest or spiritual hobby. So that is who it's ideal for. Finally, how you register. You go over to the website. I'm going to take you back there. And it's at the bottom of the first year page. You're going to find that the early bird rate is in effect until October 24th. You can save significantly off the cost of the course when you use the early bird rate, where you can pay in full, or use an early bird installment rate plan. Both are going to save you off significantly off the cost of the course. But also at Nightlight, it has always been our mission to make sure that astrological education is accessible for everyone. So please, if you are someone who would love to take this course, but maybe you can only afford a small amount of tuition per month, use the tuition assistance. It is there. All you got to do is apply. You fill out the little form. You tell us your situation. If you're on a fixed income, if you're on a limited income, if you're part-time, if you're in between jobs, if you don't make a lot and you're on that fixed budget, we understand. We don't want people to hurt themselves trying to study something that is spiritual that we feel should be very accessible for everybody. So if you're someone who could use a little help to make this program happen, for whatever reason, maybe you're a single parent, or you're on disability, or you're retired, or you're on a fixed income, whatever the case is, use that tuition assistance. Also, people in other countries who have extreme, exchange rates, we get it. So just use the tuition assistance, and we'll be glad to make sure that the price point is accessible. For us, as a spiritual topic, we're a business at the end of the day, but we believe that this is a spiritual topic. And so accessibility has been a part of our model for 16 years now. We've never not had one of our training programs with affordable sliding scale-based prices for people who need it. So please take advantage of that. It's all there for you. I hope to see you in classes soon. And if you have any questions about the program whatsoever, direct them to us at info@nightlightastrology.com. And I hope to see you all coming up here in November. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.